All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have you here. I see some of you guys in the chat already. We have Southeast England, Ireland, Cincinnati. We're so happy that all of you guys took the time to join us today to go over cold calling and, 10 things you need to start doing now. So today we are joined by Dominic Lara, Senior Account Executive, former SDR at Seamless, and Cynthia Handel, head of global sales at Samara. We're super excited to have these two join us today to go over these strategies. I did post some stuff in the chat. Feel free to go ahead and chime in with what shows you're currently binge watching. I personally need some new ones now that I finished Bridgerton, but we won't talk about that. Also, guys, this is going to be recorded, so there will be a recap email sent out to everybody if you'd like to share with your teammates. And be sure to drop in your Q&A for these guys. We have a full hour. We're going to be taking some questions live. So I'll direct you guys where to do that over on the chat. But with all of that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our experts so we can get some good tips going. Hope you guys enjoy.
Hello, everybody. I hadn't been in a Rev Genius seminar, I think webinar in a really long time, so I'm really excited to be here and really excited to be here with Dominic. We're going to go ahead and introduce yourselves first. Cynthia, I'm the head of global sales at Chimera. For those of you that follow me or don't, you should on LinkedIn. My content is what I do every single day. As you guys can see, I do cold calls. That's why I'm wearing a Jabra headset. But I also lead BDR, the BDR all internal outbound motions at Chimera. Exciting world. And what Chimera does is we help companies in the USA hire remote talent in LATAM, and now we're global. So that's a little bit about me. We obviously want to know about Dominic too.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. My name is Dominic Lara. I'm a senior account executive here at Seamless AI. Started off as an SDR, so definitely have experience cold calling. And of course, in the account executive role, do some of that as well. So those of you that are not familiar, Seamless AI helps teams get real-time email addresses, phone numbers for prospecting efforts, cold calling, and to find, potential clients. So yeah, a little bit about me. It's my first Rev Genius webinar, so excited to be here.
We're excited to be here together. So our topic today is cold calling, 10 things or general strategies for effective cold calling. So the way we're going to do this is Dominic and I have built a list of 10 bullet points or like 10 general strategies. And we're going to go back and forth and we're going to discuss them on what works for us and what hasn't worked for us in the past. So let's talk about research. So Dominic, how much do you research or you don't research your prospects? And this is a good take because you're an AE and I'm full cycle plus SDRs, BDRs. So right. I definitely want to know what you think about research.
Yeah, so when it comes to researching for our prospects, what I typically like to do, I got this tip from a good colleague of mine named Jared. I like to look at my meetings the day before, right, and try to go through their LinkedIn, go through a little bit of information about the company. Have we ever met with them before? Have they ever used our platform before? Do they have any free users? Kind of see a little bit about their industry. Typically maybe who they prospect to, what clients have I worked with in the past that I could use as social proof when connecting or reaching out to these prospects. Maybe what their needs are typically whenever they're looking for a tool, something like Seamless. So I like to do my research the day before to try to set up my day, take some notes, right? Maybe see who the key stakeholders are going to be at that company if the deal progresses further. So that's typically some of the things that I like to do is, prep the day before and then of course, before the meeting as well.
Yeah. So that's a really good take. I think that with me, it's a fight between research and no research. I think because of the product that I sell, I'm most successful when I talk to customers that have some sort of hiring intent. And when I talk about hiring intent, they have open roles on LinkedIn, Indeed, whatever other platforms there are, because there's an immediate need versus just the typical spray and pray approach. The only research I'm doing is I'm only making sure that the accounts are located in the USA and Canada, and that my persona or decision makers are located in the USA and Canada. So when I do personalized emails, I make sure that I refer to that hiring intent. Like, I saw on LinkedIn that you're hiring for XYZ role. This is what we do, and we solve this XYZ problem. It's been getting me a lot of meetings lately, just referring to that specific hiring intent, but that's all of the research that I do when I'm doing email. However, when I'm doing cold calls, it's another different story, because our RevOps team builds our list. So I might get any in that list sometimes. And disclaimer, we both use Seamless and Apollo, so we have both data. I don't know if you know that we're actually using Seamless too. So we use Seamless and Apollo. So there's a mix of everything in there. And whenever I see if I'm talking, it really depends on the persona that I'm talking to. So when my dialer's dialing and I look at it's a CEO and he picks up and he actually lets me pitch, I open up their website as fast as I can, just to be able to look at the website and like, oh, I did that yesterday, and I'm like, oh, I'm looking at your website right now, and I saw you have a bunch of open roles, and he's like, yeah, so we're doing XYZ. They were actually working with an employer of record in Costa Rica, and that led to something else. I didn't end up being a booked meeting, but he did send me an email with your booking link. We might talk in a couple of weeks. So just having that bit of personalization, like, I know it's not preparation because you're cold calling and it's an automatic list, has helped me a lot, like a lot. It definitely helps build rapport. It gets the conversation going. And, it just shows that you're not just like generically calling to slap pitch people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I did, when I was doing much more cold calling in my SDR days, that's one of the things that I would like to do. I know you said you would like to open up their website. I'd like to do that with their LinkedIn, and their website as well, as we're continuing the conversation. But typically I would like to have their LinkedIn pulled up to maybe find some sort of way to relate to them, to build rapport and kind of bring that wall down. So it's not so much of a cold call, and to just sound like you know them, right? Whenever you are calling them. So that's some of the things I like to do as well, is pull up their LinkedIn, see a little bit of background. Maybe we're based in the same area, or, something we have some work, some commonalities, things like that.
I agree with you. So the next topic is going to create a lot of controversy, and I really want to know your take because mine has changed over the years. Scripts. What do you think about scripts? Like, are you a script person, or what do you think about scripts?
Yeah, so I think, as people are just getting into cold calling or SDR world, account executive world, full cycle, I think a script at the beginning is definitely a good foundation, right? Because once you get a script down, you know what questions to ask, how to handle different objections and things like that. However, once you progress and start learning more and start memorizing all of those things, I'm not so much of a script person. So really, I'm kind of the same way. I only used a script for the first few weeks, and then once I got comfortable, right, I would try to add different things to my script that I kind of gained from listening to other top performers, things like that. But I'd say at the beginning, I'm team, build out a script so that you can build a foundation and understand what objections, what the commonalities are that you're going to hear from prospects when cold calling. But once you get the hang of it and you start mastering cold calling, I think going off script is just fine as well, because you've built up the wealth of knowledge of how to handle anything and everything that comes at you.
So you literally read my mind. I'm on the same page as you. Like 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I hated scripts, but I really wasn't looking at things objectively, because in every single sales role I've had, I've built the script, except that I had just forgotten that. It's the thing that when you become, a more seasoned sales rep, the script comes easier to you because you're just, conversation flows. But I remember back in when I started as an SDR back in 2020, I did have a script I built, and I would stick to that script. And I would even have an objections and rebuttal script that I would open up when people would say like different objections. FYI, I was in the car wash world. I sold car wash point of sale systems. It was a very technical product. So I needed to like have every single explanation out there for the objections I had. So I had completely forgotten about that. And I agree with you. If you're very new to the car, not to the car wash world, very new to the sales world, or very new or selling a very technical product, you should stick to a script until it flows naturally and you feel confident enough that you don't need a script. And there's bad days. Like there's bad days where you even lose your flow, and just going back to a script always helps out. And what Keith in the chat said, I like to have a script as a reference point and knowledge base, but to adapt my approach is always useful. When I'm training BDRs, I give them the script that we have built out in Chimera, but then obviously your personal approach, permission-based openers, like they work really well for some people, they don't work for others. Like for me, I'm all about permission-based openers. It makes me cringe, like the, hey, how are you? Like, that's not my thing. I'm 100% permission-based and it works for me. So it's something that really, really, really works out. But again, it really depends on the product that you're selling, on how comfortable you feel. And obviously, product market fit. You can have a great script built out. You can have everything nailed down. But if your product doesn't have product market fit, and somebody I think mentioned that in the chat as well, if your reps aren't qualifying prospects using the same set of qualifying questions starting out in a script, then you're going to struggle as an organization to understand exactly. That's what we're talking about, product market fit. Like in the script, you build out qualifying questions, but I think that also comes naturally to when you really understand the product that you're selling, because I don't interrogate people during the chat that I'm having with them. I just, obviously, after my permission-based opener, I start having the conversation, and that's how it, like the CEO that I talked to yesterday, because I told him what we're doing. He's like, yeah, we have people in Costa Rica and we're doing XYZ, but we're trying to move away from that because we're hiring. And that's how it got to the conversation. And you put it into your conversation. So again, it really depends on how comfortable you feel with your product or not. So that's our second one. Third one we could talk about is openers, which is something that I just mentioned before. Are you, Dominic, a permission-based opener person, or are you more about the how are you?
I think it just depends, right? Sometimes it comes natural. I try, like I said, don't always follow a script. As you know, I progressed and got better as a salesperson, but I do like the permission-based opener, right? Kind of like asking, hey, came across your LinkedIn, came across your website, wanted to introduce myself if that's okay. And then kind of open it up to them to say yes or no, and then go into, you know, the pitch about, you know, what your product does, how you can help them, et cetera. So I agree with you. I do like the permission-based opener, but I feel like just depending sometimes on your mood, your tonality, the, hey, how you doing today? Or how's your day going so far? Sometimes it's not so bad, but I try to not do that and focus on the permission-based one.
Yeah, for me, I shadow my reps 3 times a week. We have something called like a live cold calls 3 times a week. So for me, whenever I hear the reps call and they're using like the how are you, it makes me cringe. I don't know why. And I don't have anything against anybody using that, but it makes me cringe because the way I do use my permission-based opener is like, hey, Brian, this is Cynthia. I want to be completely honest with you. This is a cold call and I do this for a living. Like, you're not going to believe how many people laugh at my opener and they're like, yes. And I'm either going to get a yes or no. Like, that's it. It doesn't lead to anything else. I just feel me, again, not against anybody. It doesn't work for me. Like, hey, Brian, how are you? This is Cynthia at Chimera. It sounds fake and it makes me cringe in general, just because it's not my style. And because it makes me cringe in general, like I don't feel comfortable with my personality. You know, it makes me cringe. Like it's not me. And I think people have told me like not multiple, I think hundreds of times, like, I respect that. Yes, you have 10 seconds. Like somebody also told me today, like, you're not going to do it in 10 seconds. You have 20. And we laughed. And I pitched him and he said, look, it's not going to be a good fit because XYZ. And I told him, oh, I appreciate your time. And we ended the conversation. But tricking somebody into a conversation doesn't get you anywhere. Like, you're going to get people pissed off, unfortunately. And it's not my style. Like, having somebody just put it in the chat, like, when I get cold called and the rep starts or something like, I see we both went to Penn State, the person immediately shuts down because it's a cold call. These aren't your friends. It's, you're slap pitching somebody, you're trying to get them to take an intake meeting or an introduction meeting to your company. So honesty for me wins always, but that's just me. If you're using the, hey, how are you? And it's working for you, I love it. And I definitely think that you should continue to use it. And this is when you're talking about openers, Ronan, Prasar, if you're here, I love you. And I learned this from you. He's one of the great cold callers out there. Like, I'm a huge fan of him. Tone of voice is everything when you're using permission-based openers. And Ronan once said that there's 3 types of tone of voice, and that you should find out which your style is. So the first one is obviously the funny type. Not everybody can be the funny type. I'm definitely not. I'm using, like, I do cold calls for a living. It's because I run the PR team and because I also do cold calls. I'm doing full cycle and I'm booking meetings. It ends up being funny, but I'm not the funny type. Like, I'm not good at jokes. I'm not a funny person in general. So I can't joke with prospects unless they joke back and we're laughing, whatever. So that's the first one, like comedy. The second one is a warm and friendly tone of voice, which I would define that to be mine, like super upfront, but I'm also warm. I'm answering their questions. And then the third one is clear, confident, and professional. Like, those are the 3 tones of voice. And what Ronan says is that you should match your tone of voice to the tone of voice that the prospect has. But obviously, if the person gets aggressive, you're not going to fight back with aggressiveness. So permission-based openers go around the tone of voice that you're trying to mimic or to what your style is. And even if you're not using a permission-based opener, you're doing like the, hey, how are you? Tone of voice is really important because if you're not building rapport, the cold call's not going to get anywhere. That's just my take on it. How do you feel about that in general?
Yeah, I completely agree. I was going to bring that up in terms of tonality. Just, I know when I was an SDR and even now as an account executive, reviewing my calls and hearing how I say things, how I sound, and calls in the past, tonality is everything. You don't want to sound like a robot who's just cold calling hundreds and thousands of people, right? You want to be, like you said, there's different styles, and then you can typically pick up on the style of the prospect, within the first 30 seconds or so, and try to mirror that to match them and kind of, relate to them and not off-putting, so to say. So I definitely agree tonality when it comes to openers and just in general, even on sales calls beyond just cold calls. I think it's super, super important when you're initiating those conversations.
Yeah, and like staying just positive during your call can greatly influence like the outcome of the call. Like, even if you're like, oh, well, like people tell me I'm not interested, do not comment. Like, well, I appreciate your time. You have a great day. Like, that changes the entire, the entire conversation. And it helps you also personalize your approach. Like, whenever you're talking about also like permission-based openers and tone of voice, it helps you personalize your approach, because if you're just doing like robot calls, like, hi, this is Cynthia, and I'm calling you because I think like people can smell fear a mile away, and people can also know when you're sounding robotic. So having a personalized approach is always super important. Like, yes, you can mimic the great cold callers out there, but again, I think that you need to find what works for you and what gives you more success, because at the end of the day, that's what's gonna bring you meetings and help you be more successful. So moving on to a fourth like tip per se, ask open-ended questions. What are some like discovery questions on a general basis that you ask to qualify your prospect or to lead to a call to action or next steps?
Yeah, there's a really a lot of good ones, and I've learned that when it comes to cold calling or running meetings, discovery is really one of the most important parts of things in terms of qualifying. That's why I agree with what Greg said earlier. Is sometimes a script of what your sales folks and your sales reps ask in terms of qualifying to see if they're a good fit or not is definitely important, right? It just depends. I know people can ask it in different ways. So when it comes to open-ended questions, at least for seamless perspective, is hey, how are you and your team doing that now? And they'll kind of maybe guide you through and walk you through what their process looks like so that you can kind of try to find those gaps to see where their current state is and how you can take them to their future state and fill those gaps. So I think, asking, hey, how are you and your team doing that now? I'm curious, can you walk me through that? Those are some good lines that I like to use that are applicable in a lot of situations to get the prospect to open up to you instead of just saying yes or no or things like that.
Yeah. When I do qualifying questions, there's a list. I like to, not a list, there's a strategy that I learned from my ex boss. The very first time I was in an SDR or BDR, it's called the bingo sheet. And that's what he would call it. The list of qualifying questions was a bingo. So there were 5 basic qualifying questions, and it was urgency, pricing, decision maker, yes or no, looking to buy in the next whatever days. And I don't remember what the 5th one was, but if you got a yes or a positive answer to all 5, that was definitely a bingo, and you should try to pursue that prospect. So having just that as a reference, it's super helpful for whenever you're just building, like rapport during the call and you want to stick in going back to the script. It's something that just helps in general for when you want to know if the prospect's qualified or not. It was called the bingo sheet, and I've done multiple adaptations of the famous bingo sheet throughout the years, but it's always super, super helpful.
Yeah, no, that's definitely great. I know asking those open-ended questions, just getting the prospects to open up, and then like you said, with those qualifying questions, I think that's a good guideline. That's a good guideline to follow to kind of qualify them and see if they're a good fit and for both parties, right? So I think that's good when it comes to asking those different open-ended questions.
And when you're asking those open-ended questions, like, do you have like a sheet that you have built out with like those just 5 questions, or because of your experience, it comes out naturally for you, like for when you're selling seamless?
Yeah, so when I'm selling seamless, I've been here for almost three years now, so I know the product in and out, like how we help the personas that we typically work with. So I don't have it scripted out, but I know as an SDR, when I was making calls, that's something that I would have at least as a foundation. And especially when, new team members would come on board, would try to mentor and help them and kind of give them a guideline of, hey, this is how I kind of did things. Use this and kind of make it your own. So I think that's super important for people is to, maybe not take exactly what we're saying, drinking the whole pill bottle, so to say, making it your own, taking these tips and kind of making them your own style, tonality, etc.
Yeah. So what happens if during those qualification questions, somebody tells you, send me an email?
Yeah. So when send me an email, right? I know that's typically just to brush you off or get you off of the phone. I know many times whenever I'd ask that is say I'd like to ask, well, is there anything particular that you want me to send over based on our conversation today? And then that can kind of weed out and like get them talking a little bit about maybe what they want to see, something that you mentioned that piqued their interest, so to say. And then you can use that as ammunition to say, well, hey, listen, we've been able to help a lot of the same people do X, Y, and Z. Let's just, take this amount of time to set up a quick call with you or however you want to go about it.
That's actually one of my favorite ones. The one that you just said, like when somebody says, send me an email, and it's always like, it usually turns into a meeting when they say like, send me an email, and you're going to go like, sure. What would you want me to include? And they're like, yeah, just X, Y, Z. And that can also lead to discovery, like pain points, because they're like, can you please include this? So for example, you could say, like, if it makes sense to you, why don't we schedule a 15-minute call so that I can walk you through our product and you can decide if it's a fit or if it's not a fit. And they're usually going to say, sure. Like, it happens to me a lot. And what you said works wonders for me. It's one of my favorite things to do when somebody sends me an email. And I just remember that I have to start doing more of it. Like, that was a great reminder for me. So I love it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The next point, focus on benefits. So when you're talking about pain points, what are like some general like benefits in general that you like to highlight?
Yeah. So from Seamless, right? When it comes to Seamless, you're familiar with the tool. You guys use it over at Samara. It's typically going to be with the quality of their data when it comes to top of funnel, because if you and your sales team are working with inaccurate data, you're going to be spending a lot of time reaching out to the wrong people, outdated information, and spending time having to kind of manually verify and cross-reference things. So with Seamless, us being a real-time search engine, we typically help people find more up-to-date contact information, more coverage for their target markets, and more cell phone numbers, right? On the topic of cold calling, cell phones, direct dials, and things like that. Those are typically the pain points and the gaps that we help fill for prospects that are looking into Seamless or trying to get some sort of solution in place.
Yeah, especially with data nowadays being so bad.
It's
like
always changing. So
exactly. So you could get into a whole conversation of what is your data quality. If you want to get like a VP of sales or a CRO just talking, or an SDR manager, that definitely leads to a great conversation. For me, I think that a lot of people have been burned in outsourcing by other companies, candidates, and Upwork. So people sometimes are afraid to outsource talent. They're like, yeah, the candidates, I was burned, somebody scammed me, or I found, like, I literally just heard from somebody that they got scammed in a platform. So
wow.
It's about building that trust on how we're the ones taking the risk, because with Samara, it's free to interview. We only make money as if you decide to hire through us. So it's reassuring them, like, we will not charge for recruiting, vetting, or verifying. You can interview as many people as you like. And if you don't end up hiring anybody, it's free of cost. So it's just like building that trust at the very beginning on why people want to move forward to either take that meeting or just learn more about your product. The next one, objections. So I kind of have a love and hate. With this one specifically, because how do you feel about objections? For me, like, sometimes if a prospect is not in the buying window, no matter how much you try to rebuttal it and try to sell value, sometimes it's not going to work out. How do you feel about like objections in general?
Yeah. So when it comes to, objections, there's a lot of ways to handle them. I go back to something I learned early in my sales career when I was like in the financial services insurance world. It's the feel, felt, found method. So I do something around that area. Is whenever people are telling me, give me an objection, hey, completely understand how you feel. A lot of folks have felt that way. However, what they've found is if they give us 15 minutes or they let us show them how our product can help, it's typically beneficial and worth their time. Does tomorrow work for you, morning or afternoon? However you want to go into that transition, just kind of handling the objection. At least what I would like to do, or what I did, was handle the objection and then ask for the time again, right? Or ask for the meeting again, and then kind of, but in your own way, in your own styles, not so aggressively, but try to be smooth with how you're asking and handling those objections.
So for me lately, I think I've been struggling with the not interested objection a lot when I'm cold calling. Why? I'm booking meetings for myself. Mm-hmm. So I feel that whenever a prospect lets me do my entire pitch, like, I go all in with my permission-based opener and they give me full-on permission and I pitch them. And if somebody says, well, I'm not interested, I know my reps continue to ask, like, can I please know why you're not interested? For me, it doesn't work. I don't know why. Like when somebody tells me I'm not interested, I'm just like, well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. And I mark it on my dialer as not interested, because when I've tried it, like I did this like 2 weeks ago, I kept asking people like, can I please know why you're not interested? They would hang up immediately. Or I actually pissed a couple of people off. So for me, I don't know. On the not interested is if it's something that I should continue rebuttaling or not, because I feel that because I'm booking meetings for myself, if somebody's definitely not interested or not in the buying window, I can call them back later on in the future, but I'm not going to try to push it during the call. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, the not interested one is interesting, I guess, because there's ways to ask to handle that objection without just asking purely, why are you not interested, right? There's different ways, like, hey, can you help me understand, like if there was something in particular I said that you weren't interested in, or like, hey, completely understand if you're super busy right now, would it make sense for me to follow up with you and maybe set up some time for us another time? And like, just trying to not just be so aggressive and say, hey, I understand maybe they're busy, maybe you caught them at the wrong time, and that's why they're telling you that they're not interested. And so once they answer that question of, hey, is there anything I said? If you're just busy, can I follow up with you? And if they give you that yes, at least for what I used to do, I would make a note of, hey, this person gave me the green light to follow up with them. And then another way that before letting them off the line is asking, hey, next time I'm going to be following up with you. Would it make sense for us to just put something tentative so we have it on the book so I'm not calling you out of the blue again? That was a line that I like to use sometimes, of trying to set that meeting, even after they told me no, wouldn't want to give me a time. I say, hey, I'm going to touch base with you next week. Is it okay if I just put a placeholder for us at that time? And then, seeing what they say and kind of go from handle it from there.
Yeah, I think that what people need to remember is there is a difference between not interested and do not call me. Like a not interested is not a hard no. That should definitely be somebody that you call back in the future, because maybe you just called them at a bad time, they were busy. But it's not an immediate no. It's definitely somebody to call back in the future. As I mentioned, not a hard no, but if somebody tells you do not call me again, you should definitely place someone do not call us, because that is definitely a hard no. Regarding objections on that. Another one I think people struggle with is, lack of authority or not a decision maker. And I've told my reps, like when somebody tells you right off the bat, like, I'm not the right person to talk to, the next step should obviously say, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Could you please refer me, or just give me the name of the person that I should talk to in a nice way? Obviously, if they say no, well, you're just going to thank them. You should not, one, try to obviously go ahead in and pitch them. Like, go in like, yeah, but what I do at Tamara, like active listening. Like if the person is telling you I am not the right person, you should definitely not go in and try to pitch them and be pushy about it, because they just told you that they're not a decision maker. I don't think anything's ever gonna, lead to that. Another one of my favorite objections, I think, is we're using X, Y, Z, because with X, Y, Z, you can explore, I think, pain points. Like in your case, when somebody tells you, I'm not interested, I'm not interested. Sorry, when somebody tells you I'm working with XYZ, you can say like, oh, XYZ is a great company. What's working so well with them? And they're going to go, oh, we like it because of this, this, and that. And you can just ask them, oh, that's great. If you could change something, what would it be? And they're going to say something. And that's your golden opportunity. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a good one. Whenever they give you that they're already using a competitor, right? I'm using company X, Y, and Z. Like you said, hey, how's that going for you so far, right? Asking those to kind of keep it like an open-based question to get them talking. And then maybe you can ask, what I like to ask is, well, is there anything that you wish they could maybe be better at, or anything they can improve on based on your experience so far? And then that'll kind of help you, find some of those gaps that you can help use as, ammunition to say, hey, well, listen, we've been able to help a lot of folks, using XYZ with a lot of the same things you just mentioned there to me. Why don't we go ahead and set up a call for tomorrow for 15 minutes? You prefer morning or afternoon? What works best for you? And then, asking it that way. So that's kind of how I like to handle it. That objection.
I'm busy. How do you feel about that one? Normally, I think that people forget that I'm busy is a brush off. Like, or I'm about to get into a meeting. Like,
Right.
those are the most common brush ups, and it's just human nature to brush off somebody that's cold calling them. Like, you should never take it personally. And how do you feel about people that use the approach of, yeah, that's exactly why I'm calling you. All of my prospects are extremely busy. Like, I've heard that some people use that. How do you feel about that one?
Yeah, with that one, I wouldn't say that I've used that one much. And like you said, I feel like it is just a brush off. I'm about to hop into a meeting, or hey, I'm super busy. I think it just depends on the type of person. You can hear it in their tonality to kind of match them and say, hey, I completely understand. I'm super busy as well. I won't take too much of your time. The reason I'm calling is, or asking for that permission-based opener, or going like that. So that's how I typically deal with those. Or hey, I'm completely busy as well, or I wanted to give you a call because of X, Y, and Z. So that's how I would typically handle that one. If people are telling me they're busy, is going that route.
Exactly. How do you feel about one of the biggest, and I think one of the scariest ones? How did you get my cell phone number? This is a personal cell phone number, like, and you get that aggressive tone of voice.
Yeah. So that's where it's, it can get tricky, especially from Seamless's perspective, right? With Seamless's perspective, we are the tool that helps you find the emails and phone numbers. So that almost gives me an in of why I'm reaching out. Hey, that's exactly, the way I found your contact info is actually through our tool. If they're, aggressive, right, you may want to take a different route, but a lot of times you can turn that negative into a positive of, hey, I actually found your phone number through Seamless. That's why I'm calling. We want to help you and your team get in touch with your prospective clients as well. And they kind of go, that's how I typically would handle that, since we are the tool that helps you find the emails or phone numbers, or that's exactly why I'm calling you. I want to show you X, Y, and Z, how you and your team how we can help you and your team do the same.
Yeah. I think that I've heard reps say, like, I found it on LinkedIn. I've told my reps never say that, because nobody has their phone numbers on LinkedIn posted publicly or on their website. I think the best way to approach is when somebody tells me, like, where did you find my number? It's just come up with something that, oh, my marketing team or my RevOps team builds us a list of contacts to call to. I'm more than happy to remove you if you want to. I don't get a lot of the, where did you get my numbers? I get one like 2 times a week. But yes, you should never lie. Like what Greg said is just right, because our RevOps team builds the list. And I always tell them, like, our RevOps team builds the list. If you want me to remove you, I can go ahead and remove you. You should never lie about, I saw your number on LinkedIn. Well-known fact, nobody puts their cell phone numbers on LinkedIn. Yep. I saw your number on a website. Nobody, I mean, very rare cases. There are companies that put their cell phone numbers on their websites. Very specific use cases. I would say 99% of the companies do not do that. So never, ever should you lie. Like, oh, I got your number. And if you work for a data provider like Seamless or Apollo, it's a good opportunity to say, like, I work at XYZ company and this is how we got the numbers. But I've told my reps specifically on our side, never say, like, oh, we use Apollo to find numbers. Or Seamless. I've told them never use that. You just say, my RevOps team provided us a list, because it's true. We put the list into the dialer and you're giving this set of numbers to call. But if the person wishes to be removed, you mark them as a do not call immediately. And the final objection before we move on to something else, we're very happy with what we have. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so when they're saying they're happy with what they have, right? That's kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little earlier. It's like, oh well, how's that going for you? Or, what, how much success can you walk me through? Can you walk me through how much success you guys have had, or what have you guys been able to accomplish with that, or just different things to try to get them speaking about what they like about it, and then that's where you can try to find some gaps if you can. But in those cases, if you've gone through multiple questions and discovery and things like that, and then they're telling you that, hey, we know what you guys do, we're happy with where we're at, we're in contract, etc. You can still push a little bit and try to see if there's, hey, I mean, would you even be open to supplementing just to see if there are any gaps, right? Like, what if I got you access to and showed you that there were gaps that you may not know about, different things like that. So it just depends, but I try not to be too pushy when it comes to, hey, I'm super happy with what we're at, where we're at. And if you can kind of tell that it's maybe not the best fit or not good timing, etc., you can kind of back off and move on to the next.
I think that's something that worked for me in the past when they would say, I'm happy with what we're using. I would obviously say like, oh, so what company are you working with? And they would say like XYZ. And I'll always take the high road, like never bash your competitors. I would say, yeah,
Right.
they're a great company. We're different from them because we do XYZ and they do this differently. If it makes sense to you, we can schedule a 15 or 10-minute call to see how we're different from them. And if anything, you can better what you actually have. That can either lead to a very, yes, or to a very, like, thank you, I'm not interested and I appreciate it. And you can just move on. It happened to me in the past when I was in the car wash world selling car wash point of sale systems. There were eventually only 6 competitors in the market. So I worked for like the hot startup one, and it was like very well known in the industry. So people would want to talk to me just to compare pricing and see how things were different. A lot of them didn't buy, but eventually some of them ended up switching over. So you never know. Like people are not going to tell you sometimes that they're not happy, and they're not going to tell you the problems that they're having until you have them in the call, and they're going to say like, oh, so your pricing is cheaper, or oh, you can do that. We currently can't do that, until you're actually in the discovery call. So that's always a good one. So moving on to the next one. Let's see. Follow up consistently. Persistent often pays in cold calling. So yes, follow up. How do you follow up, Dominic? What is your strategy on following up?
Yeah, so when it comes to cold calling and following up, I would try to ask the right questions. And even if someone told me no, they're not interested, send me an email, right? I would try to kind of get their permission to follow up with them, and then actually follow up with them. And essentially, when you follow up with them the following week, use that as like a warm intro. Like, hey, Cynthia, I know we spoke last week. You were super busy at the time. You recommended I reach out. Recommended I reach out next week. Wanted to see if we can set up that 15 minutes that we discussed. Does tomorrow work better for you? Something along those lines when it comes to following up and someone giving you some sort of indication of interest, so to say. So that's the way that I would go about it. I would make my own notes in the dialer, right? Whenever I was using the dialer, when I was doing self-source prospecting, I would take notes on on my own sheet and things like that. So that's kind of how I would go about following up.
Yeah, I think consistency is key. Like people are not disciplined and they forget that that's how things work. Like having a very organized way of doing your follow-ups, having your own system, even if your system is crazy and only works for you, is how you will be able to book meetings doing outbound. Like I have a very set process and it works for me because I have my entire day time blocked and it works. Consistency and follow-up always works, especially when cold calling and somebody tells me I'm not interested right now, but give me a call in a couple of weeks later. That will probably lead to a meeting 100%. So We're going to do the two final ones. We're almost running out of time. And then we're going to leave some time for Q&A before we finish. So tracking your calls. How do you feel about tracking your calls and calls being recorded? Because most people that use automatic dialers track their calls.
Right. Yeah. So I know that's something that we do here at Seamless for when it comes to, coaching, training, how to improve, listening to the top performers. That was something that I would like to do when I first started at Seamless, because it was my first, role in the tech space, and I'd done cold calling in the past, right, but nothing to the extent of the way we do it here at Seamless. So, obviously I wanted to be the best, and so I would listen to the best and try to learn from them, hear those key intros, those key talk tracks that they were using to kind of turn them into my own and make them my own from whenever I was, reaching out. So when it comes to tracking calls, I think it's super important to learn and just improve your knowledge and build out those different talk tracks and sentences that'll help you progress that getting to a meeting eventually. So I know that we definitely track those and, the dialer system. And then of course, if it leads to an opportunity, tracking it in a CRM system.
Yep. Completely agree with you. So before we wrap up and do Q&A, this is the final one, and it's actually one of my favorite ones. It's training. And that goes in hand with the recordings of the calls. Like, one of the best ways that you can learn is listening to cold calls from the top performing reps at your company. Why? Because one, you can get inspired. Two, you can get ideas on how to build your own script or add things to what's working for them. You can add them to what's working for you. And three, improvement. Like, no one's perfect. I listen to my best performing reps calls because it gives me ideas on what questions I should ask or what should I add to improve. And if you're leading like an SDR or a BDR team, I think it's extremely important to always have training, like do live cold calls, do role plays. Even if you're an SDR or a BDR, you can do role plays with your partner, with your friends, with your other team workers, because that's what cold calling is about. It's about continuous improvement. It's about switching your style. What works one week, it probably not work the next, or will probably work for the next 3 months. It's very unpredictable. So training, practicing, listening to what other reps do for me is crucial.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know as an SDR, like even whenever I would have, because we would do team calls and things like that, and so people would be listening to you book that meeting. So I know even whenever I had success in booking a meeting, I would still try to ask the group, the sales managers, hey, what could I have done better? Right? Did you hear anything there that I could have been improved on, or said something to get more disco, or maybe get another decision maker? Hey, who else would want to join this call with you, right? Would it make sense for anybody else on your team to join the call? Different things like that when it comes to, booking meetings as an SDR. And I know even as an account executive today, we do tons of call training. Shout out Joe Morrell and the call training team at Seamless, because that's something that we focus on to constantly improve. So as you transition and, move throughout your career, I think it's super important to always improving, always trying to get yourself better, and listening to those calls to improve and learn from your mistakes, and how to better yourself moving forward.
Got it. So we have wrapped this up, and we want to leave some time for Q&A. So we want to go ahead and leave a couple of minutes for you guys to put your questions in the chat, and we're going to answer them for you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
So I see the top one. I'll just start from the top, from the oldest first. It looks like Lorenzo Pickett. He asked, Dominic, how much do you research prior to calling a property? What does your prospecting process look like, such as cold calling immediately or waiting until someone connects via LinkedIn? So when it comes to doing that research, as Cynthia and I mentioned at the beginning, it's learning a little bit about the person, the company that you're going to be prospecting into. For Seamless, we're primarily in the business to business world, so we aren't doing much research on properties, I'll say. But either way, it's the same. Do research on your property, your prospects, learn a little bit more about them, and then, pick up the phone. I know you asked there, would you wait to call someone? I would say don't. Maybe send a connection, send an email, but don't, put off picking up the phone, because in my opinion, that's the quickest way to get a meeting and get something done.
Agreed. Let's see, what other questions do we have on the chat? We had a couple. It can also help to just ask, sure, no problem, what is a better time to reach you? Would tomorrow morning work? Yes, I think that definitely works for when people are busy. And that's just another way of having, a block time or a placeholder to just follow up on.
Got it. Yeah, and I know we had Denise as well. Had mentioned, do you guys find people that answer more on the phone or more on email and LinkedIn? So I know for me personally, I was a phone call person. I would like to pick up the phone and dial. And I know some members on my team were super crafty with, email campaigns and LinkedIn messaging. I think it's important to use all of those as different touching points throughout the prospecting efforts. But me, I think it depends on a style thing based on you, the company. But I was more of a phone person. What about you, Cynthia? I would assume the same thing.
I would say the same thing. I'm on the same page as you on that one. 100% agreed. And I just read this good question that Gurpreet has. What tips can you give to hone in on your messaging when calling a new prospect? Intent. I think that when you're reaching out to new prospects and you have some intent of what they're interested in, is always going to help. Like, not going to lie, I booked between yesterday and today 8 meetings just on intent, mentioning something that I saw on their LinkedIn page or on their personal page that my solution solves, and it's led me to next step. So that could be something there.
Yep, I would definitely agree. And then it looks like we had another question from Lorenzo. A few of them. He said, what are a few of your most frequently asked open-ended questions? And then how many times do you attempt to outreach before you close lost a lead? And what is the cadence at which you follow up? So I know for me, I like to ask, hey, I'm curious, can you walk me through that? Or, can you elaborate a little bit about what that looks like on your end or what you and the team are doing now? That's kind of for Seamless's use case. I know for Cynthia, maybe a little bit different when you're asking those open-ended questions around hiring and, initiatives and different things like that. Those are some of the ones that I like. Cynthia, do you have another open-ended question that you like to ask frequently?
I think one of my favorite ones is, would this make sense to you right now? Or is it when they say no? I like to say, does it make sense to you now? Or would it make sense to you in the near future? And they say yes in the future, can we set a placeholder for the next XYZ dates and see if it works out?
Okay. Yeah. And then I know there's another question in there by Lorenzo. How many times do you attempt to outreach before you close lost a lead? I know for me, my rule of thumb is around 4 to 5 touches, just depending on if there's been zero engagement, right? Typically 4 to 5 touches. If there has been interest, engagement, back and forth, I'll typically bump that up to 6 or 8. But it really just depends. Every deal is different. So those are, yeah. What about you, Cynthia? I guess how many times you usually touch with?
So
prospects?
It depends if I'm cold calling or if I'm emailing, because if somebody says I'm not interested via email, I definitely opt them out. I'm not going to continue cold calling or emailing them. And if somebody says not interested on the phone, I'm going to call them back for follow-up in the next 3 months or so, or 2 weeks or so. So on that side is what makes it different. But it really depends on the scenario. if I don't like sending more than 2 messages on LinkedIn, because 1, people can block you, 2, they can also report you. So if I don't get a response after my second message on LinkedIn, I stop following up, because I don't want to be that person that spams people on LinkedIn like 5 times. With email, if they're not replying back, I just pull them out of the sequence after a 7-step sequence. FYI, that's what my sequences are. And with cold calls, if I haven't gotten a response after multiple times, I just move them on to another sequence like 3 weeks from now or 1 month from now.
Nice. Good. Good. All right. Looks like we have another question in the chat from Ahmed. What tools do you guys use for finding intent in niche markets? So I know I can definitely help out with that one. Seamless AI does offer buyer intent or intent data for different markets that you may be looking for. And then we can, of course, get you their contact information, their emails, phone numbers. So now that you know that there's some sort of buyer intent or intent, you have their contact information to reach out appropriately. But what about you, Cynthia? Are you using anything else that you would recommend to Mohammed in the chat?
I think that when you're sending out something to new prospects, personalization at a small scale is what's going to make it so different from anything. Just any type of personalization. It's not even about the tools. It's about standing up against the noise, because you're not the only person emailing, calling them, messaging them. So sometimes it's not even about the tools. It's about what makes you so different from the other people that are currently emailing them. With me, an email, I technically delete everything that seems like a cold email to me, unless it's something that calls my attention. That's it.
Understood. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good one. It's not always about the tools. That's just something good takeaway there. I think we had another one with Charlie. Another question: how do you walk a new prospect through your product, company, without flooding them with too much information? With that one, Charlie, at least for me, it's all about discovery. I'll give a shout out to Ryan Feely at Seamless. It's all in the discovery about, what's important to them. So I think it's about asking the right questions, so you know exactly what to show them, and you're not necessarily being a tour guide or just reading off of a complete script. So you kind of know where their pain points are and how you would be able to help. So that's how I go about trying to make sure I'm not flooding them with too much info about our tool.
Yep. And something else is product dumps, because you don't want to be that person that's creating product dumps with your prospects. Like, sometimes you want to get your point across, and you want to talk to people, but at the same time, you don't want to dump them with 5 different products, or just make it boring, because that's obviously going to lead to an unqualified meeting. So just be careful of that.
Yeah. And then let's see, how would you combat, from Lorenzo again, how would you combat a prospect who's working with a competing company, then describes a pain point that your company cannot solve? I think that's just about, being honest about if you guys are a fit or not. And when it comes to qualifying, because not everybody's going to be a fit for your tool, your product, or your service. So I'll put it that simply, just being honest that it isn't a good fit.
Yep. And not trying to push products when you definitely see that somebody is not a good fit. Just stay away from it. If something raises red flags, trust your intuition. Don't move forward with booking a meeting that doesn't make sense just because you're desperate to get a meeting. That usually ends badly for everybody involved.
Right. Yeah. Definitely not a fan of, setting or running super unqualified meetings. Always happy to try to help people, but completely understand. Looks like there was another one from Richmond that Cynthia already answered. She mentioned that how long do you think a cadence should be from first touch to close? I believe she mentioned around 7 was the magic number for her. And then last question here from Keith. What do you feel is the most effective way to get past the gatekeeper and speak to the decision maker? What do you think, Cynthia?
I mean, in a realistic world, because of the products that I'm going to talk about Chimera first. So at Chimera, talking to gatekeepers does not work for us. We try to only talk to people that have mobile numbers with Chimera. However, at my previous company before Chimera, I was selling to car wash owners. We did not have Seamless or Apollo or anything. So it was just doing Google search to find out the car wash numbers and trying to reach out to the owners. So basically becoming friends with a gatekeeper, treating them like people, because leaving a message with a gatekeeper and just having the conversation with her, like really respectful, treating them as they are, because they're also people, led us to close one of the biggest deals we had in that year. She gave my contact information to the general manager when he visited the site because they were having problems with our current point of sale solution. And he ended up calling me. I didn't pick up because I was busy or something. He left a voicemail, called it back. We set that meeting and they ended up buying our product 3 months later, and it turned into a multi-million-dollar deal. It sort of hurt because I wasn't the AE then, I was a BDR, but it was amazing just seeing how talking to gatekeepers and being respectful with them eventually helps out. But again, it really depends on your industry and the product that you're selling. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, I agree. Being respectful, maybe getting their name. So when you do call that actual decision maker, you can mention that you spoke to such and such, and they mentioned it'd be a better time to reach out to you then, right? Whatever the information that gatekeeper kind of gives you. So being respectful and then, trying to get the right person to talk to is a good way to get around gatekeepers and get to that actual decision maker. But yeah, it looks like we ran through all those questions. It's been a great time, Cynthia.
You too.
Yeah, no,
I enjoyed it.
Been a pleasure. And yeah, anything else that we want to cover today? Or I think we're all set for now.
So guys, if you want to reach us out on LinkedIn, both Dominic and I are super active. We're going to leave our LinkedIn in the chat. You can go follow us. And we're more than happy to, like, if you have any other follow-up questions or if you want to connect with us, we're more than happy to see you guys there.
Yeah, just put my LinkedIn in the chat. Reach out if anyone's interested in, getting in touch with those decision makers, maybe using Seamless to accomplish that. Look forward to speaking with you and appreciate everyone's time today.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.